Good afternoon, dear participants of the press conference. We are happy to welcome you at the first meeting of the group about murder of photo correspondent Andrea Rockelli and the human rights activist Andrei Mironov. I am moderator of this event, and I am Oleksandra Matviychuk from the Center of Civil Liberties, and since many participants of this briefing do not speak Ukrainian, we will speak Russian here. So currently we are streamed from the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. So the major languages will be Ukrainian and Russian, and there is simultaneous translation on the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center website. Also, you will be able to ask your questions to the participants on Facebook in chat. We will try to answer your questions. If you were not registered on the UCMC website on Facebook, you may join our stream and ask your questions in the comments section on Facebook. So this was about technical issues, and now I would like to present our speakers. So we will have Mr. Oleksandr Cherkasov, member of the international group and head of the Human Rights Protection Center Memorial Russia, Dmitry Borko from the same organization, Karina Moskalenko, Kateryna Zarembo, and who is associated and analyst of the New Europe Center Ukraine, and Dmytro Koval, lawyer from the Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. I would like to start with the fact that Andrea Rockelli and Andrei Mironov were killed on May 27th, 2015. In July last year, the Italian court recognized Vitaly Markiv as the suspect and put forward charges against him. So there are very contradictory proofs, and the investigation results are very disputable. That's why we invited members of this international committee, international group, and invited independent observer, Center for Promotion of Center for Support of International Defense, We want to know the truth. All members of this international group, international committee, they work pro bono. We believe that cooperation between Ukrainian and Russian lawyers for the sake of the truth and aimed at fair trial is very important, not only to ensure justice, but also to pay honor to these people who were killed, to the photo correspondent Andrea Rockelli and human rights activist Andrei Mironov. It seems to me that we should start with the presentation of Andrei Mironov. We believe that it is not right that Andrei Mironov was not presented adequately. We only heard that he was interpreter or translator, but actually that's not enough. With this, I would like to give the floor to Oleksandra Cherkasov, head of the Council of Human Rights Protection Center, Memorial, Russia. Andrei used to work in many armed conflicts as a journalist. In Soviet times, he established contacts with foreign citizens. Then he spent several years in Mordovia in the political camps. Then he studied languages, visited Afghanistan and Chechnya, hotspots there when there were wars, and usually he tried to go to the armed conflicts and this time he had his own rules how to behave under the fire, but this time unfortunately that did not rescue him. And many times I asked myself, Andrei was very experienced in staying under the fire, and this time who should be blamed? Whether that that soldier who targeted the goal, or that commander who commanded to open the fire. So the mine unfortunately found Andrei, and he was killed. And now we have a case when a person was killed in the course of armed conflict, in the period of armed conflict, and now another person is charged with a murder which happened during the armed conflict, but charged in line with the laws of the peaceful time. So I believe that Andrei would not be happy with that, because he loved Italy. he studied the language, and he loved Italy. And of course, we remember Andrei Mironov as a defender of all those people who suffer in the zones of armed conflicts, a person who wanted to remind other people about that who suffer in the areas of armed conflicts. Now I would like to invite Dmytro Koval, Associate Professor of the Kyiv-Mohyla Academy in Ukraine. The tragedy that happened, it happened during the armed conflict, actually during the war, in the context of war. So there should be the legal status of the conflict, and actually the norms, international norms of the humanitarian law, international norms of the merit of the wartime law should be used. Whether that was took into consideration by the investigators. My field is rather narrow, and I have to shift to the legal language now and perhaps explain in more detail some very specific aspects of this legal field. From the international law point of view, the events in that May could be qualified as the armed conflict, whether it was international armed conflict or national armed conflict. And the international court had established that from April 2014 there was the non-international armed conflict. So from the International Criminal Court point of view, the May was a period when there were non-international armed conflict. That is, the international humanitarian law could be applied in this case, and that all the crimes committed during this period should be seen as the military crimes. But the issue is that the Italian courts applied the national law, the national criminal law. In the national criminal law, there is no provision saying that since there is the war conflict, you cannot apply the provisions of the criminal law. The same is true about the criminal responsibility. In the Italian criminal code, there is no provision saying that since a person participates in the military conflict and has not and has committed the deed which can be subject of criminal persecution according to the national criminal law, then it should be judged in line with the international military law, international law about armed conflicts. That's why the Italian court applied the hybridly international law. On the one hand, they applied the general criminal article for the murder, commitment of murder. Then, when the Italian prosecutor's office quoted the Geneva Convention, other international norms, proving that Markiv was guilty. At the same time, those references strategically were not cohesive. Sometimes they used the Geneva Convention about international armed conflicts and never made conclusions that the victims were under protection of that convention. All that allows us to say that the Italian court took into consideration all the provisions of international law which exists now. If we assume that Italian authorities took into consideration the provisions of the international humanitarian law, would apply big differences whether the victims of the offense can enjoy the privileges of the combatants, whether the parties to this offense could enjoy the status of the combatants. If there is no non-military conflict, so this should be the first question which had to be answered, which had to be resolved by the court. Whether the next question which had to be answered, whether he or she was on military service, and citizenship here is not that important. And even in case of double citizenship, it is clear that the primarily citizenship should be taken into account by the court. If a person is a citizen of the country which is party to the international conflict, then this is again much easier and speaks in favor of the victim. Unfortunately, the Italian court applied provisions of the international law very discretionally, contradictory, and not in cohesion. The context was not taken into account that there was armed conflict and that participants of the conflict enjoy the status of the servants on military service. We know that the humanitarian law imposes positive obligation on the country to carry out investigation, and it is important that such investigation should comply with the norms and the standards of the Council of Europe, and the right to fair court is very important. That's why we invited Karina Moskalenko, a lawyer from the Center for Promotion of International Defense in France. Good afternoon, dear participants. In my opinion, our organization was invited to this committee because we are able to stay neutral up to the very end of the review of each case, and because we are able to weight all the considerations. Our Center International, which is located in Strasbourg, that's why we agreed for participation in this committee. What we managed to do, we managed to command to Milan our colleague Anna Petukhova. She is a French citizen with French education, and from time to time she offers her services to our center. And she has experience with the cases in Russia, in Ukraine, in Armenia, in Spain. This is our first Italian case. That's why we applied to Anna, who has a good command in Italian, and she was seconded to Milan and managed to participate and tried to participate in that closed court proceedings. She had an instruction to stay absolutely neutral, to study the materials of both sides impartially, and Anna has got that permission to be present as an independent observer with the credentials from our international center, French International Center. And after yesterday's hearings, she provided us with a very detailed report, and that report demonstrates the position of the state state prosecution. Yesterday, the defense had put forward several very important requests, and we will follow up and and she she will check whether that petitions are well grounded or not. On the other hand, I would request from you to remain the neutral and impartial up to the very end of this court. Oleksandra mentioned our broad expertise, and our opinion and our position is that if we try to review this case at the national level, then the conditions of the fair trial from the human rights sphere should become the center of that proceedings. Of course, since there were two people killed and one person injured, to which extent the efficient investigation was held. We will check this against the efficiency of investigation procedures. Our task is to understand to which extent the victims enjoyed the right. The access to the materials, the independent and impartiality in investigation, whether all that was present. As for the Russian killed person, I came to conclusion that Andrei relatives were not invited as a party to the trial. I was personally acquainted with Andrei. We jointly participated in several actions, and I personally decided not to participate in this case. And that's why we have sent impartial person to Milan, and she even now had expressed some doubts about impartiality of the investigation. On the other hand, there is the defendant party in this case, and Anna immediately started to clarify whether the defendant party had all the opportunities to defend itself, to provide evidences, to invite witnesses to court, whether all the features of the fair trial were present for the defendant. Perhaps I distressed you today, but I have to stay impartial, and I would remain impartial up to the very end by the moment when we have the full picture and full opinion on this case. Karina, thank you very much for presentation of your position. It's quite clear that the case materials and the details of this case, they are rather disputable and contradictory. With this, I would like to give the floor to Dmytro Borko from Human Rights Protection Center Memorial from Russia. Dmitry has a huge experience. He was the he participated in the Nemtsov murder case, and he will present the results of his analysis.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. First, I would like to note that I, as Karina and Oleksandra, I knew Mr. Mironov, and I really respected him. And for 20 years, I have been working as a photo correspondent, including the conflict zones, and I have some understanding of these matters. In the framework of this initiative group, my function is the consideration of facts and consideration of evidence. What are these evidence, and how the guilt of the defendant is proved, whether these evidence are enough. In such cases, you studied the verdict, and when I opened the verdict of the Italian court, I was really surprised that contrary to Russian verdicts, and I constantly read these verdicts, this is a detailed report about the court hearings, about witnesses, all the witnesses, factors, all the materials studied, all arguments. Moreover, also, it was a surprise for me that in these pages I found a lot of schemes, photographs, included references to video footage. This was a full story about investigation and to what conclusions they got to. It was detailed, a lot of specialists were heard, many evidence was were presented, but the main questions, this is not new. The questions were formed before me. If someone was interested in this case, maybe you saw publications of Stop Fake, and they studied details of this case, and Arkady Babchenko materials, and he was in Slavyansk at that time, in Gorikatum, where Vitaly Markiev stayed, and they didn't say everything because they didn't have final document. The verdict. We have some advantage in this. And I will speak about the final part, the conclusion made by the court. And they included all the facts and then came to conclusions. And I was surprised by this conclusion because in essence, this was like the conclusion of the Russian court. A small example, the main 3 people two photo correspondents, young people, and experienced person who accompanied them, and he was a fixer and interpreter, as they mentioned this, and we believe that he was an assistant and even a consultant, because Andrei had larger experience than those young guys. 3 persons came to a front line near Slavyansk during hot battles. They were at the confrontation line between Donbas separatists and Ukrainian army that held the Kharachun highs, and this was a tense moment, and the court recognizes this. There was a hot confrontation. They came to this place. Some firing starts. They are trying to hide near the road, and they are caught in fire, and the Ukrainian side starts firing, and one of the mines hit. 2 persons die. Third person, Argyron, he was wounded with fragments together with the taxi driver. First runs the driver because he believes that everyone is dead, and then Argyron also is starting to getting out of there. So Argyron, except him, no one was questioned why it was not done by Ukrainian side. I do not know about this. This is a separate story. Except that there was a driver and a person who came out of the forest and warned Andrei Mironov about something. And the Frenchman, he didn't know what they were speaking about. And Mironov said that they should leave urgently because he got some information, and the shelling starts. So the only witness is the Frenchman. And there were some details provided, and there were some bright memories, and this provides the elements of the attack, and fundamental considerations appear, showing that this attack was launched by Ukrainian side, and the defense said that a young photographer, he got a big shock. He nearly died because of crossfire he got into, and he was in shock because of this. And his evidence, they were contradictory and not precise. And the court brings this argument of defense, and they say that in his evident wish to present precise reconstruction of the case, Rodion didn't express his opinion as his own, as the defense asked him, but to open before us only facts. A bright, dramatic experience that goes from his memory, and they said that they want, and from the other side they speak that he only wanted to present facts. What we may tell about his evidence interviews before this? There are some words about death, and I cite the verdict. I believe that I will die and the tree will fall on my head. Then he refers. Then he says. Then he sends a message to his colleague that everyone died and he was dying. And some fragments were only in his body, and he took these fragments away himself. And he met pro-Russian forces. These were 30 people. 4 people pointed guns at him, and he was only he only told them that he is a journalist, and he believed that he would die. And his story ended when he came to Slavyansk hospital, and under stress and disturbance, he got some help. And there are many emotions about his imminent death. And this is the evidence of a person mentioned by the court as fair, impartial, precise, and they say that these are only facts he provided. Region, he is the reliable witness because he is not a civil, that he is not a party of this in court hearing, and he is fair. And I would like to comment. John, he is, after the story, he made a career out of the story. In France, he was the first journalist who got compensation from French government as an independent correspondent who volunteered to go to the hot point, and he got financial compensations. He had some exhibitions, got some journalist prizes. He now is dealing not with photography, but he got money from the government, and he founded some business. So he made career out of it. I do not throw stones into him. I do not know things about him, but I'm speaking about what I know. So this person, they say that he is a reliable and non-interested party. Second citation. When a group came to this region of pro-Russia, there were no pro-Russian people. And there are contradictions of his evidence, because the Samaritan said that there were some people, not those Ukrainians in 2 kilometers, some other guys, that he met 30 militants on the road. And we cannot understand whether they whether they fired at him or not. And then he said that there were no pro-Russian people. And there were no military in the forest. So he said that they were in the gutter. He said that no one came there. So then they said that someone backed him when they withdraw, and he got away from this ditch. He said that he got out of there, he kept running, then he saw that someone is firing, then they shouted something, then he saw a car that was passing by, he got into this car, and then they understood that the car was hit by a bullet, that the window was broken by a bullet. And they said that there was no aggression, but this needs clarification. And an interesting aspect. So these cases concerning military actions, military crimes, These cases should be dealt with by people who understand these cases, or we may bring more special consultants or military professionals to deal with these issues. Interesting fact. When they came there and met a man, there was something said. Mironov said to go back, and the court says that they were going, they not in the hurry, not threatening anyone. And there is a contradiction with the real situation, as I understand it. Maybe Mironov got a warning about some threat in this place, and Region said about it. They said that they should go with the distance to have equal distances between them, and they shouldn't run, but they should go fast. This is right solution of professional person who knows what to do in military conflict. But what the enemy may see in this, they see that some people who came to the front line, they are withdrawing like military professional people, as people who know how to avoid danger. And this style of movement could tell the enemy that, or this movement showed that they are not civilians, and it also shows that Andrei tried to save everyone using this method. This was near the territory, near Zevsk ceramic plant. This was a base for covering Donbas militants at the front line. I would like to show you one picture. I didn't see it in these investigations. Ergion says, I will demonstrate this on the screen. We can see this. Yes, we see the picture. It appeared. I clearly see the picture, the scheme. So this is the scheme. Green, yellow spot, and you see the place where Region and Andrei Mironov came to. This is factory, and at the beginning of the red arrow, this is Karachun Heights, where Ukrainian forces were deployed, including Mr. Markiv. And you see also some forest lines and the ditch they jumped into when shelling started. And Grigorian said that when they came to this crossroads, they came under automatic gunfire, Kalashnikov or machine gun fire. We believe maybe this was Kalashnikov. And this distance from the top and the line about 2 kilometers. And Kalashnikov will not reach this. So there was a large caliber machine gun. And the court takes the words of Region that the first fire came to Karachun, and they believed that the bullets that came near them, they hit the wall from the right side. From this is the white wall of the plant, and so from the side of the hotspots of Ukrainian forces, we see how this arrow goes to the wall of the plant, and our heroes, our journalists, they are a little bit to the side, and now nothing would flow above their heads. And if someone is to the right of them in these wastelands, if someone opened fire from that side, and they fired from that side, then the bullets would go above their heads. I couldn't find this in the verdict. They were not trying to find out from what side the fire was started. If we are speaking about nearing woods, there is no Ukrainian forces. There are no Ukrainian forces. All this territory was controlled by the militants. The question is, who fired fire first against these journalists? I couldn't find the answer. The second picture I wanted to show is the picture from the dispute that appeared in court, and we should deal with it because in the court they paid a lot of attention what position was taken by the National Guard and Markiv, and also the detachment of Ukrainian forces that had mortars, because they were only with the small arms. You see the white line and the distance 1,550 meters. This is the shortest distance they could move, Ukrainian forces could move, because from other slope they couldn't move because they would go under fire. And the farthest distance is 1,700. And the red picture, red arrow, as Markiv said, and witnesses, his servicemen provided this information, these National Guardsmen who stayed with him. So they were in this position, marked by a red dot. You may see only Andreevka village, and it is impossible to see the road and to see the crossroads, because there is a slope of the hill, or they take the position closer to the yellow dot, then maybe there is such an opportunity that they could see this road. They had the opportunity to see journalists who came up to the front line. This is really important criminalistic matter, but I won't go into detail because we should study the documents. And I believe that this is not really important because I didn't see in the verdict the answer, the real answer on the most important questions the court should ask. Whether Markiv could see the journalists who came out of the car. Could he understand that these are the journalists and not Donbass militants who occupied the territory near these settlements and who, I repeat, shelled from this point at Karachun and the Ukrainian positions, and who decided to open fire, mortar fire, against this live target. A lot has been said about it, but there were no proper arguments. I couldn't find it. But I believe that it exists, and we need to study these materials more to understand this. About Karachun Mountain, how it looked in reality. So I took several photos. I found them in on the internet. So there is a building, the Zeus plant near Slavyansk. This picture is taken from the positions of National Guardsmen, Ukrainian National Guardsmen. Could a person see something from there? So this is a photo from the military actions taken by professional Ukrainian video operator during these military actions. Then we see here Zeus plant. This is a mid point, and we know that there is optics, binoculars, and optic sights. So they make the picture closer with the use of the camera, and they provide a closer picture. So this is the picture we see with the maximum use of our camera. We are not looking at the journalist, we are looking at the background. So this white is the Zeus plant. So this is done by professional camera, and we should find out whether they could see this target, to see the photo camera, and to say that this is not a combatant. Is it possible to see a person, not only a journalist?
Yes.
This is interesting picture made with a big zoom. This is a corner of the Zeus plant. The picture is made from above, and here you see the something which is put on the road by the militants. And just imagine that near that blue boxes, big boxes, somebody is wandering around. Whether you can understand who is there. Although Markiv informed that his position was with the view of Andreevka village, not on this side of the hill. Nevertheless, let's imagine that he was here. This is 4 times far away from Markiv than Andreevka village. This is the picture which could be seen by those people who remained on top of the hill. Dmitry, will you please sum up your presentation? We will shift to another speaker. Sorry for taking too much your time. And eventually, the last thing which I would like to mention, when Markiv was charged, one of the biggest statements and one of the biggest churches was which was taken as a proof of his participation in this conflict, and he was seen as the commander. This was intercession of his telephone talks. When somebody mentioned to him that there were journalists and Markiv answered that just imagine that you go to the lion where he is, and that very result of the interception was charged to Markiv. So my conclusion and my opinion is very simple, that I am not convinced with the facts and proofs which were demonstrated by the investigators and by the court. Thank you, Dmitry. I would like to add the fourth question. How did the court prove that Vitaly Markiv was on that very position which was described as his position? And also the article by Marani, who became the starting point for investigation and the beginning of charges against Vitaly Markiv. The article is rather short. We had translated it and we disseminated that article among media law and media experts who will provide their comments whether it is well balanced, and there is a presentation that it was the case of the journalist who fought for the freedom, and there were quotations made without actual sources, without any proofs. Ilaria Marani never spoke to Vitaly Markiv. In the court, she confessed that she never spoke to him. Then the discussion was between Markiv and Fauci. So that article, very short one, but with the big problems as to the impartial journalist story. It became the major argument for the court. It was called the spontaneous confession by Vitaly Markiv. We will have a special presentation of that article, and I would like to ask Kateryna Zarembo from the New Europe Analyst Center and describe other articles which were published on the topic. Thank you, dear colleagues. I have to apologize again also for my Russian language. Sometimes I forget the words. I'm not a human rights activist. I'm associate analyst of the New Europe Center, and I study the relations between Ukraine and Italy. I was invited to this group, this committee, to assess the civil situation, the media response to this story with Vitaly Markiv. We will try to to look at the publications, at the society response. As my colleagues, I try to remain impartial. In the past, I never attempted to analyze the Markiv case. Today, I will describe the situation by the moment when the verdict was made, the court verdict. And today we observe that the situation is slightly changing after the verdict was announced, but I will cover the publications by the moment of the verdict. So my criteria are the follows: the balance between both sides of the case, journalist standards, references to the sources of information, presence of cliches, stereotypes and mistakes in publications, and the emotional coloring, whether it is well balanced, impartial, or it contains any emotionally colored thoughts. The results of my preliminary analysis, the publications that cover the trial, the investigation and trial of Markiv's case, they are not very numerous. There were some publications which, main publications, which caused the response from Ukrainian side, and some other republishings, La Repubblica, Espressa, La Stampa. They were not locomotives in coverage of this process. They simply retranslated what was written in other media. First of all, I would like to mention the presumption of guilt in all that publications. Unfortunately, all those publications impose that Markiv is a murderer, Markiv is guilty. They assume that he is guilty from the first moment. The next, what we clearly see, the cliches and narratives which are used mainly by Italian mass media when it comes to Ukraine. They use all the so-called analytical materials published about Ukraine, about Eastern conflict in Ukraine. They all use stereotypes and have no doubts about those, that these are stereotypes. They use cliches and clear words. Unfortunately, not so much attention is given to the person of Andrei Mironov. But of course, Italian mass media are more focused on the Italian participant, on the Andrea Rockelli. So, publication by Gatti says that after 2014, Ukrainian parliament was occupied mainly by the right radical party. At the same time, the right sector, the right radical, so to say, party took 2% of seats in Ukrainian parliament. Another type or example of cliche. Andrei Mironov, the speaker of the Ukrainian parliament, had founded a party which ideologically is close to the Hitler's party, and that the people who support Kharkiv in Ukraine, these are radical skinheads. Those who support Kharkiv during the hearings, they are neither right radical party nor the skinheads. You can look at the photo. And the articles which cover this process, they do not give the floor to the opposite party. Those who support Kharkiv never were given the floor, never had chances to present their position, which actually conflicts with the journalist standards. These are my preliminary conclusions, and now about emotional coloring of when you try to look at any publication in Google, you may find that more articles about Rockelli and his murder than about Marker. It's natural that co-citizens of Andrea Rockelli are more concerned about punishment of those who might be guilty, and they believe that he was a good professional, he was a good person, he was a good family member. He was very much loved by his colleagues, and people obviously demonstrate empathy, sympathy to Andrea Rockelli. And this empathy is the key for the for those who represent the interests of Vitaly Kharkiv, Andrei Mironov, and Andrea Rockelli. This is mutual. This is the mutual figure for all three sides, so to say. And for Italians, this demand on justice is equal to blaming Vitaly Kharkiv. Nobody assumes in Italy that Kharkiv could be blameless, that he should not be blamed for what happened. And we obviously observe this absence of the feeling of justice. Kateryna, thank you so much. I do not see any questions. And it looks like we can sum up. Speaking about preliminary results of work for our international committee, we observe rather contradictory statements, proofs, and also there is rather biased vision demonstrated by the Italian civil society. So the result of the committee work will be presented in late October, early November. Since there are no questions to our participants, we will finish with this. Thank you.